Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking about resolving conflict. And boy, conflict is something that we all know about. And I have my wife, Barbara, here. I'm Chuck Lewis, and this is Barbara Lewis, and we're just excited to be on today. And this is the first time that Barb has joined me on the program, and she's going to be on at various times. And I know what some of you are saying right now. I want her to be on every time because she's such a beautiful lady, and she really is. I thank God for her. But we're going to talk about resolving conflict, and I definitely know how to have conflict.
Me too.
Would you agree with that?
I think we're both good at that.
I don't think I even I could write books on how to have it. I want to be able to write books on how to resolve it instead of how to have it. We all know how to have conflict. It's very easy to do. But what we've learned in our marriage, and we've been married for about 27 years, going on 28 years. And I'll tell you what, we've had conflict for sure in those years. But thank God we've been able to work through the conflict. Sometimes it's been hard, and sometimes it's not been so hard, but
yeah,
it's been a challenge, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, nobody likes conflict. I want to run away. I don't want to stay and have conflict, but I know how I feel when I stuff it and don't face it. So, and the consequences of that is usually sleeplessness, stomach aches, headaches. And so it's better to go ahead and face it and work through it.
Yeah, and really, I have found that the biggest need that a woman has is she needs to feel safe and she needs security. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest needs a man has is to feel significant. So if we can provide that for each other, not completely, because only God can provide it ultimately,
True.
but if we can assist in that process, that can provide a lot of safety for you, Barb, and it can provide a lot of significance for me. So what would you say helps you to feel safe?
I think what I need is to know that you're not going anywhere when we have conflict. I need to know that it doesn't mean things are over. One thing I've heard, and that Chuck and I do, if the conflict is really bad, the conversation starts going badly, is that the marriage wall is intact. And so what Chuck and I'll do is reassure each other when we have a conflict or a conversation that isn't going well at all. I'll say, I'm committed to you. The marriage wall is intact and I'm not going anywhere. Because within that safety wall of marriage, you can work through a lot of things. And it just really helps to know that it doesn't matter how hard it is or how bad it gets, I'm not going anyplace. I'm committed to you and I'm going to be with you, and we're going to work on it for as long as it takes. And for us, sometimes the conversation has to happen 2 or 3 times, because the first time we're too impacted by what happened, where our emotions are too involved. And if we take a time out, which we'll talk about, it helps me to get some distance from the feelings and be able to have the conversation and understand, what you're thinking and feeling. So, and then the third time, it seems like I, for myself, am even better at distancing myself from the feeling not, the emotions aren't quite as raw and can hang in there. And it's just, is encouraging when you're able to work all the way, to resolution. I do want to read a verse about that in Romans 12:18. It says, if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with one another. And one thing I love about the Lord is that we can't necessarily control the outcome of whatever conflict there is, because we can't control the other person. But he can still say to us, well done, my good and faithful servant, based on how we handled our part. So I'm responsible to handle my part in a godly way.
Yes. So, so you were mentioning about taking a time out. Let's talk about that a little bit,
Okay.
because I think that's a very important part of it. Because if you're talking in a conversation and you're having a conflict, and that conflict starts getting out of hand, and what I mean by that is we can get so escalated that we start saying things that we feel bad about saying later, and we can't believe we even said it. We can't believe that even came out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Well,
And you can't take it back.
you
once
can't
you
take
say
it back. Exactly. And you might want to, but you just can't. Once it's out there, you can never take it back. So if you take a time out, if you're that escalated and you can't, what I call, contribute to the conversation anymore, then you need to call a timeout. And what that means is sometimes you just say, you know what, I need to take a little break right now, or I need to go to the restroom. I mean, if I've talked to couples that have said, boy, if I say the word timeout, they're going to blast me for that. They're going to say, well, what are we, 2-year-old? Well, if you have a situation like that from either the wife or the husband, then you might not want to say the words timeout, but you just say, I need to go to the restroom. That would be a way of breaking the conversation for a moment to de-escalate.
Right. And that's a really good point too, is that if the person who's angry doesn't take a time out, you can take a time out for them.
Right.
You can realize that the conversation is escalating and you can take a break. And what you said is a good idea. If the person can't hear time out, they're not going to argue with you for needing to go to the restroom.
Yeah, usually people won't stop you from going to the restroom. So if that's what you need to do, then you just go to the restroom. Now, again, what's unhealthy is for the other person to follow them
Yeah.
to the restroom. That's power and control. That's what that is.
Yeah.
So to not enter into that, you say, okay, if they need a break, then I'm going to let them have a break. And then the key is, and this is really the key to why timeout works, is because you've got to come back and try to talk through it again. Because if you don't come back to talk about it again, you've just used that valuable tool as a weapon. Because it's very easy that if something's talked about that you don't want to talk about anymore, just because you're frustrated with it or whatever, all you have to do is call a timeout. That is terrible, because any tool that and skill that you use as a weapon defeats the purpose of using it as a tool and skill. You've just defeated that whole thing.
Yeah.
But if you call it a timeout, you break that cycle of escalation, because if we're escalated, there's I guess the blood travels to the large muscles of our body for fight or flight.
Not our brain.
I'm sorry?
And not to our brain.
And not to our brain.
Yeah.
So creative ideas are not going to come to our minds because all the blood's going to the large muscles of the body. So you've got to do something else to reacclimate the blood. So exercise is a good way to do it. Just do some jumping jacks or something to reacclimate the blood. It doesn't have to take hours to do that. It can just just be 15 minutes or so, but then you come back and you talk about it again. So somebody asked me one time, well, what happens if I take a time out and I come back and I think I'm ready to talk and then we get into it again? Well, you call another timeout. I had one guy tell me one time that he said I had to call 10 timeouts on one topic.
Mm.
Well, that's a long time to get through one topic.
Yeah.
But at least he did what I call being in the adult position and not acting out as a child, because if we're acting out as a child, we're not going to take a time out. We're going to just stay in there and the conversation is going to get worse and worse. And then a lot of things start flying out of our mouth that we don't want to say and we wish that we had not said.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked to couples before that we've heard them say incredible things to each other, and then we taught them never speak what you don't want to see happen, only speak what you do want to see happen. And Barb and I have made an agreement between us in the years that we've been married that we will not bring up the divorce word. We just won't bring it up. We treat the divorce word like a horrible word, and we just will not say it.
And just saying that word takes away safety.
Yes.
If you're afraid someone's going to leave or divorce you, that makes you feel very unsafe.
Yes, it really does. Yeah, and now we're operating in fear and we're operating in escalation because now we're worried that the other person's going to divorce us. They may not be even thinking about that, but out of frustration, those powerful words can come out of their mouth. And I kind of like to think about it as being the president at that moment, to say, the president's not going to stand up and declare war on a country and then say, oh, I was just kidding, or I was just aggravated. Right. He's not going to do that because he knows his declarations are powerful and world changing. Well, our declarations can change our relationship as well. So the Bible said we're redeemed or condemned by the words of our mouth.
Right.
It doesn't say the words of God's mouth. It says the words of our mouth. So I've got to take responsibility for not speaking what I don't want to see happen.
Right.
I've only got to speak what I do want to see happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't be threatening. I can't say something to you that's going to threaten you if I want a healthy relationship and you are in the same boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a good idea to talk about the timeout when you're not in the middle of a conflict, to just let the other person know that you're going to do that, and that
good point.
That person has the right to take a timeout too. If things get escalated, and you can let them know it's because you're too valuable to be mistreated or to be spoken to disrespectfully, and I'm too valuable to be spoken to disrespectfully. So just to it's good to just talk about or warn each other that you're going to take a time out if that happens, but that you will come back and talk it through, and just reassuring the other person that you will come back and talk it through, I think helps provide safety too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And really taking a time out, practicing a timeout before you need it is like a fire drill.
Yeah.
Why do we do a fire drill? You do a fire drill before the fire. You don't do the fire drill during an actual fire. At least you shouldn't, but if you do the fire drill before it, then you know what to do. And timeout is exactly the same way. The minute contamination words start is an indication that there needs to be a timeout, because the truth is we're both, and you, if you're listening out there, you're way too valuable to be spoken to disrespectfully. I feel like I'm talking to somebody right now that maybe you've never heard that before. Maybe you've never heard anybody ever say that to you.
Yeah.
But I want to say that to you in surround sound, that you are way too valuable to be treated disrespectfully. Now, you'll never control the other person. So we can't control anybody or anything they're doing, but you can control yourself. So the minute disrespect starts, then that's your signal, like to do a timeout. And think about it like a fire drill. If you smell smoke or you feel the flames, then you do you call 911 or you do something different. You don't just start watching a program. If you're smelling smoke or seeing a flame, you call 911, right? Well, we have emotional 911s all the time, but we don't prepare for them. I think I've only had to call actual 911 3 times in my entire life, but yet I've had hundreds of emotional 911s continually. And, and we don't practice what to do with those emotional 911s. So practice does not make you perfect. It makes you better. And the more prepared you are for a conflict, the better the conflict is going to be.
True.
The Bible says to make every attempt to resolve conflict. Now that tells me that that's not a guarantee that conflict is going to be resolved, but we can feel good about all that we have done to resolve it.
Right.
Okay, that's our part. So if the other person does not want to resolve conflict, then maybe you want to get a third person involved with talking about stuff that's not working. We believe in counseling. We believe that sometimes situations require bringing in a third party. And if you don't have a good connection with that counselor, just thank them for their time and go to the next one on the list. A lot of insurance companies have several names of counselors on their list. So you just go to the next one, and hopefully you won't get through the entire list until you find somebody. But if that's what you have to do, you need to do that. I personally interview my primary care doctor. And that's gotten a lot of interesting comments, because when I've gone in there to interview my doctor to see if I want to choose them to be my primary, they've said, well, what's the problem? Why are you here today? And I said, well, I'm here to interview you to see if you're going to be a good primary care doctor for me. They say, you don't have any physical problems going on? No, I'm just here to see if you're going to be a good fit for me, and I'm going to be a good fit for you. And I've had to pay for that office call, but sometimes it's been the best investment that I've made, because I can tell within the first 15 minutes usually of that interview if that's going to be a good doctor or a bad doctor. There's good doctors and bad doctors. There's good lawyers and bad lawyers. I mean, in every profession. So you've got to have a good one that's going to work with you over a long period of time. And that can reduce a lot of conflict right there too. Because if you have a doctor that's going to be a good advocate for you, then you can get a lot accomplished. A lot of people have been so frustrated over their doctor because their doctor doesn't hear them, doesn't really listen to what they're wanting. They just have their own agenda. And I had a doctor one time that I asked him a question, and he said, he didn't answer my question. He said, what's my finger? And he's started moving his finger back and forth. And I says, well, back to my question, I wanted to know a certain thing. I don't know what the question was now, but he said, I'm not here to answer your questions. I'm just here to find out what's going on with you physically. And I said, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, because you're fired. And he was shocked. He said, "You're firing me?" And I said, "Yeah," because being a hospital chaplain, I knew that I could be a patient and I could fire the doctor. And after, boy, it made him so mad. He walked away, and the nurse stepped up and she said, "I am so glad that you did that because he treats people like a jerk and nobody's ever stood up to him before." Now, I don't like people, I don't like to just be a jerk myself, but I'm not going to tolerate something that's going to escalate me and be treated in a dishonoring way. And I believe counselors, doctors, lawyers, any profession should treat you with respect. You don't have to agree with everything they say, and they don't have to agree with you, but we have to learn how to do it respectfully. And that's what we're talking about today,
Yeah.
how to talk about things in a respectful way and talk about things that are very intense sometimes, but you do it in a respectful way.
Right.
So when the respect stops, what?
That's when the conversation stops and you
That's-
take a timeout.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do because your mind's running 100 miles an hour and you want to keep getting your point across, but you just have to stop it, don't you?
Right. It's a loving thing to do.
Yes. Well, we're excited to give you some tools and skills. We've just barely scratched the surface. We're going to be talking about this some more on other programs here. But if you want to write in your questions, you can do it through our website or our email. And if you want your name mentioned on the questions, we'll do that. If you don't want your name mentioned, just let us know that as well, and we'll just address the question without mentioning your name. It's been great to be with you, and we're going to continue this next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.